The Verve is a unique group whose sound cannot be reduced to one genre. While they only released 4 albums together, they all bear their own identity. There were many conflicts within the band, including lawsuits, name changes, and drug abuse. Regardless of strife, their sonic achievements continue to inspire the music community today. This is the story of the Verve. Richard Paul Ashcroft was born on September 11, 1971, in Wigan, Lancashire, England. He had a tumultuous childhood, marked by the loss of his father to a brain hemorrhage when he was only 11. Due to his stepfather's influence, he would learn about the Rosicrucian movement, which combined the occult with Judeo-Christian faith. During his time in secondary school, his behavior would be seen as rather polarizing. His teachers referred to him as a cancer one minute and incredibly intelligent in the next. Richard initially aspired to be a footballer, but his interest shifted to music as he grew older. While attending Winstanley College in 1989, he became friends with the future members of the band, guitarist Nick McCabe, bassist Simon Jones, and drummer Pete Salisbury. The soulful Funkadelic, the lyricism of Patti Smith, and the artful recklessness of the Stooges all came together to inspire the young bandmates and would push them to create their own innovative sound. Originally known as simply Verve, early band sessions involved getting high and performing long-winded jams. While most bands in their infancy began this way as somewhat of a joke, they were actually quite talented, and it became apparent that this was an integral part of their style. Their first performance was in August of 1990 for a friend's birthday party. Richard proved to be a compelling frontman very quickly, dancing barefoot and belting stream of consciousness lyrics. Nick's guitar work was similarly spellbinding. He captivated audiences with his avant-garde textures and psychedelic solos. He could never play the same thing twice, and that kind of creativity kept people listening. The Verve developed an audience by word of mouth, and they were soon signed to Hut Records in 1991. This is the same label that signed the Smashing Pumpkins and Drop 19s. Because it's all inside. Because it's all inside. Their first release would be the single All in the Mind in March of 1992. It's a truly euphoric track that would only scratch the surface of what they would come to produce. The song was a hit among fans, but didn't make the UK charts. Their next 2 singles were called She's a Superstar and Gravity Grave, which would be released in June and October of 1992, respectively. She's a Superstar is a 9-minute journey that was said to be recorded in a swimming pool to give the perfect echo. Simon's bass playing is reminiscent of rolling thunder, while Nick's guitar work shimmers with otherworldly reverberation. This is a one-of-a-kind shoegaze song. Bit of a fun fact for you. The music video was shot in Thor's Cave in Staffordshire, the perfect venue to visualize such an enchanting song. Gravity Grave is equally hypnotic, sounding like a pleasant acid trip. These tracks would set the stage perfectly for the Verve's first EP. Aptly named the Verve EP, it was released in December of 1992. It featured 5 songs: Gravity Grave, A Man Called Sun, She's a Superstar, Endless Life, and Feel. The EP is well put together, enveloping the listener in an ocean of reverb and star-roving guitar solos that seem to have or want no end. An out-of-body experience, to say the least. In the fall of '92, the Verve would perform around 20 shows to promote their newly released material. 3 of these shows would be their first in the United States, all of which were in New York City. They would even open for the Black Crowes in their High as the Moon tour. Following these performances, the Verve returned to the studio to record their first full-length album. A Storm in Heaven was produced by John Leckie over the course of 7 weeks. 7 of the 10 tracks on the album were recorded through inspired jam sessions that went on into the wee hours of the morning. The final product is an ambitious album which prioritized atmosphere over conventional song structures, as each track drifts in and out. Nick's trademark use of dense reverb creates a heavy, almost underwater feel at times. Richard seems to introduce himself through the lyrics, singing, "Hello, it's me," and calling out, "I can see you." I was thinking maybe we could go outside, let the night sky cool you off. The album is fantastically lush and dreamy, while also brutal in its musicality. Echoing arpeggios, endless solos, and unbridled passion greet the listener each time. Every time the record ends, you'll want to play it again. time almost ceases to exist, and each track begins to bleed into the next. Each band member pulled from their aforementioned variety of influences, as well as growing in their personal musicianship, and it shows. Although it initially received mixed reviews upon its release in June of 1993, it would garner universal acclaim in years to come. NME would go as far to name it one of the 500 greatest albums of all time in 2013. A Storm in Heaven peaked at number 27 on the UK charts, and the Verve saw themselves gaining traction in the United States as well. The band was invited to Lollapalooza 1994, a well-known North American music festival. Regarding the tour, Richard would reflect upon the fact that while it was an adventure, it would prove equally exhausting. He wasn't exaggerating. On July 11th of that same year, Richard would get hammered with members of the Breeders and the Bad Seeds. He went on stage to perform, but instead collapsed and began convulsing. He was taken to the hospital to be treated for severe dehydration. That same evening, Peter would destroy his hotel room in a state of drug-induced delirium, and he found himself in jail the next morning. To complicate legal matters even further, the American jazz label, Verve, initiated a lawsuit against the band for sharing the same name, which forced them to add the word "the." If you look at the album cover for A Storm in Heaven, you can note the last instance of the former moniker. Recording the Verve's second album began in November of 1994 and would span 4 hectic months. Sessions were reportedly intense, fueling discord among the band. Richard split with his girlfriend and spiraled into isolation. However, it was well produced by Owen Morris, who would later go on to work with Oasis. A Northern Soul was released in June of 1995, and it's a far cry from the freewheeling psychedelia of A Storm in Heaven. The band was tighter, having toured and gained experience. Simon commented, "We didn't want a repeat of what happened with A Storm in Heaven, where we didn't have any material when we were going in to record." There is a definite shift in sound. It steps away from the swirling shoegaze of their early work in favor of conventional alternative rock. Richard's vocals are brought to the forefront, and his lyrics reflect the roller coaster of emotions he'd been experiencing. Regarding these personal issues, Richard is quoted as saying, "Each song is a Northern soul going through different emotions. I hear this character all the way through the record. Pretty pained, then elated, then arrogant. All facets of that personality are a Northern soul. That's what I am." The album opens with A New Decade, a clear proclamation of the band's growth. The song absolutely slaps you in the face, and I personally invite the pain with each listen of this song. The band showcases its newfound cohesiveness with a 1-2 punch leading into This Is Music. While the album is not as soaked in reverb, it still feels larger than life, this time with sheer volume and power. Even so, Richard sings, "We've got a lot of living to do," which feels equally reflective and ambitious. Tracks like On Your Own and History open new doors, using more stripped down or sweeping orchestral sections to further draw any listener in. Typically, a change in song structure has the possibility to disappoint a fan of a style they've grown accustomed to hearing. However, the Verve absolutely knew what they were doing. They grew in just the right ways, finding new methods to express the gravity of their feelings and frustrations. These risks paid off. A Northern Soul peaked at number 13 on the UK album charts. In addition, This Is Music, On Your Own, and History were all released as singles, and all of them managed to crack the UK Top 40 Singles chart. The harried recording sessions of A Northern Soul would unsurprisingly lead the band to split up for a time. Richard, Simon, and Peter would reunite the band several weeks later, but Nick refused to rejoin. They would recruit Bernard Butler of Suede to be their new lead guitarist, but this was short-lived. The band then chose Simon Tong in 1996, the school friend who had taught Richard and Simon to play guitar. During this time, the Verve had refrained from performing live to focus on practicing and integrating their new guitarist. Nick finally agreed to return in early 1997, and Urban Hymns would be the only Verve album recorded as a quintet. Released in September of that same year, Urban Hymns was an international success. 'Cause it's a bittersweet symphony. The opening track, Bittersweet Symphony, is regarded as a pivotal moment in Britpop and the Verve's crowning achievement. It came to fruition when Richard heard an orchestral version of The Last Time by the Rolling Stones. The Verve sampled this track and made it their own. The final product is a delightfully sweeping number with Richard's notable existential lyrics. This album is entirely more personal and reflective, as shown in The Drugs Don't Work, Lucky Man, and Weeping Willow. Drug abuse, death, joy, and love became the theme, and thus, the Verve became more accessible.
Now the drugs don't work, they just make you.
Urban Hymns is now recognized as one of the greatest albums of the 1990s, if not all time. It sold more than 10 million copies, topped the UK charts for 12 weeks, and was the first commercial success of the band in the US. The album was critically acclaimed, with Melody Maker calling it, quote, an album of unparalleled beauty so intent on grabbing at the strands of music's multi-hued history. At the 1998 Brit Awards, the Verve won Best British Group, and Urban Hymns won Best British Album. It would eventually appear on many other best of lists, including the aforementioned NME's Top 500 albums.
But I'm a lucky man.
The Verve embarked on the Urban Hymns Tour in August 1997. Their May 1998 performance in Hay, Manchester had approximately 33,000 fans. However, problems arose at the height of their success. Tensions returned between Richard and Nick and led to a fistfight after a show. Richard's jaw was injured and Nick would break his hand as a result. The pressure was too much for Nick, and he withdrew from the tour. A session musician, B.J. Cole, was used for the remainder of the tour. The press whispered rumors of a breakup. In 1999, Alan Klein, a manager of the Rolling Stones, sued the Verve for plagiarism. He claimed that the sampling of The Last Time was used more than previously agreed upon and without permission. This was a huge blow to the group, as they felt their credibility had been stained. They surrendered all royalties to Klein, and the song was credited to Jagger Richards. Simon Jones alleged, "We were told it was going to be a 50-50 split, and then they saw how well the record was doing. They rung up and said, we want 100% or take it out of the shops. You don't have much choice." Finally, in April of 1999, the Verve announced their split. Richard began his solo career as he already had material to record. His first solo album is called Alone with Everyone and is more singer-songwriter leaning. Released in June of 2000, it topped the UK charts and received positive reviews. His next effort, entitled Human Conditions, received more of a tepid response, but it did catch the ear of Coldplay's Chris Martin. Richard opened for Coldplay on one of their tours. However, Richard would leave the music industry for several years to spend time with his family. Simons, Jones, and Tong would form a group together called The Shining, and they released one album before disbanding. Jones would go on to work with an Irish musician named Kathy Davey, while Tong would play guitar for Gorillaz. Nick lived a relatively private life after the Verve split, occasionally playing guitar for albums he deemed worthy of his time. Peter played drums on some of Richard's solo work and for Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. Tensions between Richard and Nick continued into the 2000s. When asked if the Verve would ever reform, Richard would somewhat famously remark, "You're more likely to get all four Beatles on stage." This suddenly changed in June of 2007 when Joe Wiley on BBC Radio 1 announced the band was reuniting, except for Simon Tong. All original bandmates would be back together to record a new album and play a 6-gig tour. So, who was responsible for what was thought to be impossible? Reportedly, it was Peter, who contacted Nick to work on a side project. Richard found out and called Nick to make peace. Peter also insisted the issues between them weren't as bad as previously thought, and that the media had blown it all out of proportion. Tickets for the tour sold in minutes, and it would be followed by many performances in 2008. Their fourth album, titled Fourth, would be released in August of that same year. Fourth seems to stir together all their previous work and boil it down into something new. It begins with Sit and Wonder, a nod to their early psychedelic shoegaze work. It carries on into Richard's deep personal songwriting a la Urban Hymns and lands somewhere different. By the time you've reached Noise Epic and Columbo, you see an interesting breakdown appear. The band toys with a jazz feel, letting the drums and bass shine through, while Richard croons over the sparse arrangement, leading into their well-known explosion of sound. Appalachian Springs is a 7-minute track that showcases how much the band has grown. It's also one of Richard's best vocal performances, and it sears through you with a beautiful melancholy. Reviews for Fourth were generally positive, and it topped the UK charts. Following its release, the Verve unfortunately fell silent again, and rumors of a split emerged. It became evident that the rumors were true by December of that year, as Richard Ashcroft started a new band called RPA and the United Nations of Sound. Nick and Simon allegedly stopped talking to Richard, reporting that Richard used Fourth to reignite his solo career. The former two would form a new collaboration called Black Submarine, along with 3 other musicians. Peter would go on to play drums for the Charlatans. RPA and the United Nations of Sound was short-lived, and Richard returned to his solo career as expected. He toured with Liam Gallagher throughout 2018. His most recent album was released in October of 2021, which features acoustic versions of his early work, along with a few Verve songs.
Yeah, I know I'll see your face again.
It would be amazing to see the Verve back together again, even if it was for a reunion show or a new EP. I wouldn't hold my breath though, as it appears that all the former bandmates are content with their current projects, not to mention the distrust that has never seemed to dissipate between Nick and Richard. I suspect that a 4th breakup would be too much to handle. Regardless of whether the group ever reunites, I'm eternally grateful they came together to create such a vibrant body of work. It continues to stand the test of time, discarding labels in exchange for feelings, textures, colors, experimentation, and hope. Thank you so much for watching the video. For more band documentaries, please consider subscribing to the channel. Stay dreamy, everyone.
Hey guys, Nate from Stained Glass Stories here. I would love to thank Danielle for co-writing the script and agreeing to commentate the video. You can follow her at Inverse Art for all things art related. Link in the description box down below. Thanks for watching the video.